Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you hear a buzzing in the back, that is my AC. Again, it is still summer in Manhattan and it is hot, so I do have to have that running while I am filming, so I apologize for that. But today, I'm finally going to be doing my review on Scott Leeds' debut novel, Schrader's Chord. This came out, I want to say like a year and a half ago, and it's been on my TBR for like ever, and I finally picked it up at the Strand, and I took it on an Amtrak train ride with me too, actually, and it got like just completely ruined on the dust jacket, but that is okay. That is absolutely okay, but it looks super beat up for being like a literal brand new purchase. But I am so excited to talk about this because, again, I've had this on my radar for quite a while. It is definitely on the lengthier side. It's over 400 pages, so that was just something I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to dedicate to reading it in full, and luckily I breezed through this. I didn't want to put this book down, so even though it is on the longer side of things, it's definitely something I literally sped through. So I'm going to read the inside flap, and then I'm going to talk about why I wanted to read this, and then we're going to dive into the review. So the premise is, I told you they were real. After his estranged father's mysterious death, Charlie Remick returns to Seattle to help with the funeral. There he discovers his father left him two parting gifts: the keys to the family record store and a strange black case containing 4 antique records that, according to legend, can open a gate to the land of the dead. When Charlie, his sister, and their 2 friends play the records, they unwittingly open a floodgate of unspeakable horror. As the darkness descends, they are stalked by a relentless, malevolent force and see the dead everywhere they turn. With time running out, the only person who can help them is Charlie's resurrected father, who knows firsthand the awesome power the records have unleashed. But can they close the gate and silence Schrader's Chord before it's too late? Equal parts chilling and heartfelt, Schrader's Chord is a captivating tale of death, legacy, and family, both lost and found. So this is a debut release from Scott Leeds. I had never heard of him before at all, but what really spoke to me when I first saw this was the cover. We have a skull and a vinyl record. That's really cool. I really like novels that lean into horror alongside rock music, and that sounds kind of strange, but there's actually a ton of them. Heart-Shaped Box is definitely the first one that comes to mind for me, which is probably my favorite of the genre, and definitely, I don't know what I would even call it. I don't know. Rock and roar. I don't know. But I really enjoy this kind of like rock style integrated into traditional like ghost stories. And if you are a fan of Heart-Shaped Box, you will probably really like this book. Because I definitely saw quite a few similarities in premise and tone, and just the kind of father-child relationship, the large revelations, the humanizing of the kind of rock world from the behind the scenes. Just a lot of things in here resonated with me the way that they did in Heart-Shaped Box. But of course you also have Evil in Me by Brahm. You have We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. Just a lot come out of this genre. I do actually think I'm going to do an entire video on like rock and roll horror, because again, I just think it's something really cool. I just think it's something that is kind of its own genre within itself, and I would love to talk more about it. But that is why I was drawn to reading this. And then I read it. This is a really well done book. Kind of in the vein of We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix and a little bit of Evil in Me by Brahm. You really do need to kind of understand rock history to get everything that you want out of this. But if you don't love rock music, you will still enjoy reading this. I think the final ending of this story definitely resonates more if you are a huge rock and music fan, even just music in general. It has a really kind of like sad and heartfelt ending in the same way that like Heart-Shaped Box does. And the kind of ending of the story I do think adds another level to the horror of this book. in a way that if you were not like a big music fan, I don't think you would find quite as depressing or scary. And I think that's one of the things that this book definitely, I don't want to say suffers from, but this is definitely written for a certain audience. Now that being said, this is a debut release, and I was stunned by that. And I say that because it's very rare that I read a debut novel and I'm like, oh my god, like I am devouring this, this is incredible, and I don't necessarily find too many faults with it. I think the last time I experienced that was with September House by Carissa Orlando, and that book, while it does have its flaws, resonated with me so deeply for being a debut that I was able to overlook some of the flaws because, again, first release. And that's how I felt with this. So I was going to come right out and say this was a 5-star read for me. I did kind of hesitate giving it a full 5 stars, but I was so impressed with how much this book captivated me and being a debut that I'm able to kind of overlook a few of the problematic plot holes that I would say pop up in here, which are very minor, but just something that if this was a more seasoned author, I would definitely have clocked it for. But it got the 5 stars just because I enjoyed reading it so freaking much. If you haven't been on my channel before, I definitely give authors that I love a much harder rating because I already know the extent of what they can write, and I've already been impressed by them and I've seen what they can do. But the flip side is also true. I am definitely a little bit more lenient on newer authors. So objectively, this is probably leaning more towards a 4-star, but for my pure enjoyment and the way that I was impressed by the writing in this, this was definitely a 5-star read for me. I really liked the humanization of all of our characters. I think there was a lot of, I don't necessarily want to say growth from our characters, which is interesting because I feel like normally I really like seeing character development and growth, but I definitely think there was a lot of understanding and like communication that needed to happen between our characters that made up for the fact that maybe growth wasn't happening, but their eyes were being opened to new things, and therefore there were new acceptances that were had. But at the core root of this is the story of a very talented young man and his difficult relationship with his jealous father. And I loved that was the crux of this novel. There are so many things happening. There is a love story and the history of music and small town camaraderie, even though it's set in Seattle, but there's a lot of like small town camaraderie and a lot of dialogue about small businesses versus like big record companies, and just like, again, like the dying industry of the physical music media.'t a lot of stuff going on in this story, and at the end of the day, it is also a really interesting and intricate ghost story with a very original, vengeful ghost, I will say. I really liked the ghost in the story. I thought he was very well done, very original, though I don't necessarily understand his motivations fully, and I do think that that's where some of this story does lean on the weaker side. I didn't necessarily care because the father-son relationship in this story was so well done. And just kind of looking at the idea of a father's relationship with a son versus a father's relationship with basically, at this point, 3 different daughter types, I thought was incredible. I really, really was impressed with the way that this story handled that narrative and handled not only the struggle of dealing with difficult familial relationships, but also the undertones of grief and kind of acceptance of losing somebody within this. I just thought it was a really, really well done way to go about telling the style of story, and doing so with a very clear metaphor that really knew what it wanted to say and what it wanted to take out of portraying these kind of dysfunctional relationships. And I really, really loved that. I wish I had gotten a little bit more of the mystery and lore behind these kind of raising the dead records. But I think the visuals were astounding. There's an entire scene in a graveyard that I thought was just so dark and beautifully well done, and we have these hints and glimmers of like cosmic horror and cosmic beings, but it was done in a way that I felt made sense. And while, as we know, I hate when cosmic beings come out of nowhere at the very end, it does lean into that a little bit, but in a way that to me was just kind of an explanation and a means to an end, and didn't feel like it was using cosmic horror as a crutch. And I thought that was really, really interesting to me. I thought the final sacrifice of the story was also very well done, because it is something that felt very personal to the characters, and is the reason why the story moves in the direction that it moves in. And you're hinted at it from the very, very beginning, but you don't actually realize that's what's happening until that big crescendo of an ending. I thought that was really, really, really good foreshadowing and development of a major plot device. I thought it was just so well done. I will say, again, there are definitely a couple moments in the story where I was just like, that is so over the top and ridiculous. Like, there's an entire scene with a horse trailer, and I was like actually almost laughing reading it, because to me it just felt so unrealistic and absurdist, that I was like, this has to be a dream sequence, and it wasn't. And I can just imagine, like, Scott Leeds probably wrote this thinking about what it would look like on film, and to me it makes a lot more sense seeing it visually, as absurd as it is, than it does reading about it, because it was really hard to suspend my disbelief for that. Though I've tried. And I have another book review that I'm going to do shortly on struggling to suspend disbelief, even though I really enjoyed the overall narrative. But for this one, that particular instance of suspending my disbelief was very, very difficult. But we got through it. We got through it. And it really didn't affect the novel that negatively. So that was like a major scene that to me I had to overlook. But I really liked the idea of this like separate style of records, bringing it upon yourself unwillingly. And it brings up a lot of questions for me, primarily the motivations of Charlie's father. Because Charlie and his father, this whole story, have this kind of intertwined level of respect and jealousy going back and forth between the two of them. So I really do wonder what Charlie's dad's motivations were in leaving the records to Charlie, which catapults this whole thing into being, and why he said what he said in his will to him. The whole idea of, like, I told you they were real, which again launches this whole story to where it is. And that to me is one of those things where I'm like, was that a little like F you to Charlie, kind of expecting this to happen subconsciously from the father, or was it intentional, or was it genuinely an accident? And that's just the question that I have for myself throughout the entire story, where I just wish we had clarity on that, because it does seem kind of mean and volatile to kind of dangle the carrot of mystery in front of our main character and not understand what's going on back there. But yeah, no, I thought this was phenomenal, and I'm trying to do this whole thing without spoilers, because this did resonate with me very similarly to A Heart-Shaped Box, where I do think that it is a story to move through, and all of the revelations and the twists and the reveals and everything, I don't really feel like I need to discuss, because I think the story is very like spot on of saying what it wants to say, and I don't feel like there are any conclusions that I drew from this novel that everybody who reads this novel isn't going to draw. Like, I just feel like it is a very clear-cut novel, and it's very much a story about difficult relationships between the father and son, and of course a love letter to the kind of like golden days of the music industry. I think it's really interesting that our main character is an A&R rep for a massive label, and that he is rediscovering rock bands in the age of YouTube. Like, Scott Leeds very much makes his opinions very clear on what he thinks of the state of the modern music era, and I just think it's a really, really nice statement piece for a novel. And it's scary, it's heartfelt, and it has some really, really original concepts. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how scary and well done and creepy and intriguing our ghost is in this. Again, it reminds me a lot of the ghost in Heart-Shaped Box, but done in a very different style and way, but still kind of holding the bare bones of what makes that ghost so interesting. And I absolutely adored this novel. So yes, 5-star read from me. Highly, highly recommend if you are a fan of Heart-Shaped Box, if you liked Evil in Me, even though I didn't love that novel that much, but I loved the premise behind it. And the same with like We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. Like, definitely pick this up because it's definitely in that genre, which I have no category name for, hopefully I will soon, but resonated with me in a lot of ways. But also check the trigger warnings on this. There's definitely some triggering scenes and imagery and like situations that really work for the overall dark tone and setting of this story, but are definitely worth knowing about before you go into it if certain things set you off like that, because they are very tragic and they are very gruesome and slightly graphic. So just be aware going into that. Anyways, yeah, 5 stars. Let me know if you guys have read this. I hope to see him write more in the future. I followed him on Instagram, and I don't think that he has anything new coming out as of yet, but I really hope that he does in the future, because I was really impressed with this story. Again, it reminded me a lot of how I felt reading September House and how I was so blown away by a debut author's attention to detail and storytelling and pacing and just this kind of heartfelt emotion that went into the metaphor that this story was creating, and I just absolutely adored it. Anyways, as always, I try to post every Monday. As always, I try to post 2, sometimes 3 times a week, and if you enjoyed these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.